Welcome everyone to the Discovery Town Hall on this beautiful Friday in May. My name is Laura Evans. I'm the Medical Director of Critical Care at the University of Washington and current
Yes,
Chair of
that too.
Discovery. Um, it's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you as part of the Discovery Town Hall. I'm going to kick off today with just a few updates from Discovery, but the real sort of joy of today's session is a presentation and really the opportunity to have a discussion with some amazing panelists on the newly published Critical Care Data Dictionary. It will walk us through the initiative briefly and then take a bunch of questions and discussion. I'm going to ask if you can keep your microphones muted until they're kind of done with the presentation phase, and then we'll go into the Q&A. If you have a question as we go along, please put it in the chat along with your name, and we'll make sure that it gets addressed during the discussion. Just a side note, because we are on Zoom, if you have the ability to be in a place where you can turn your camera on, that would be great. It makes it feel a lot more interactive rather than sort of presenting to a bunch of names on a screen. So if you can turn your camera on, please do so. That would be wonderful from that. And you can go to the next slide if you can. I personally don't have any relevant disclosures regarding their presentation today. And I'll kick off next just going into some updates from Discovery. So on July 19th and 20th, if you don't already know and haven't already signed up, we're having our annual SCCM Discovery. It's a really collaborative, hands-on event where data scientists, researchers are going to work together to explore real-world critical care data challenges. It's going to be at SCCM headquarters, again, on July 19th and 20th in Mount Prospect. It's a 36-hour event. You get to sleep in the middle. Don't worry, it's not 36 hours continuously, but and we're going to have some new data sets this year, including Chorus Bridge to AI, the AutoDoc Phase 0, Rediscover ICU, and more from the Mimic Data group from that. The QR code right on your screen will allow you to sign up directly, so please take a picture of it and go ahead and sign up if you're at all interested for that. Sorry, you can go to the next slide. Today also marks a really exciting event for us in Discovery, is that it's the opening of our Discovery and Wild Grant portal. So as you're probably aware, Discovery and SCCM's Wild Grant research grants are awarded annually. From that, and you can submit for Discovery, you can submit your multi-center research proposals through the mechanism to get reviewed, and the opportunity for up to $100,000 in funding for one grant. If you're conducting a single center study, you would want to apply through the Wild Grant mechanism, and 2 awards of $50,000 will be available. The grant portal closes in July. You can see the closing date is July 11th, 2025. So, take your opportunity now and put your proposal in. And we'll look forward to seeing some amazing submissions come through. You can go to the next slide. One more plug. Some of you who have been involved in Discovery have seen this before, but the PRECISE study is ongoing. This is really the effort within Discovery and within SCCM to understand what our community of critical care practitioners, clinicians, everybody associated with critical care delivery, to understand what we think are the most important research priorities within critical care. It's a very easy survey to do. Again, follow the QR code here on the screen. It'll take you maybe 5 minutes to do, but your input will be invaluable to us. So if you haven't had the opportunity to do this yet, please go ahead and do that. We would really, really appreciate your input on this. And my last slide is the next one, which is one more reminder to share your research ideas with Discovery and get feedback. So through the Discovery website, you see the nice highlight there of submit a proposal. We all have the opportunity to submit clinical investigators' proposals, get feedback on our ideas, feedback on our work so far. Your proposals that you submit will be reviewed and evaluated by the members of the Discovery Steering Committee. You can see the sort of format of the proposals there, and you may have the opportunity to present your proposal formally to a wider group of people participating in Discovery and get real feedback. It's also a great opportunity if you're sort of getting a study up and going presenting this clinical investigator's proposal can be a great way to find interested collaborators or even ask for formal endorsement from Discovery for a grant proposal. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to this amazing panel of experts that we have today, who I'm so pleased to be here with and to have the opportunity to just kind of moderate some discussion after an introductory presentation. So first off, I want to introduce Dr. Perren Cobb. For those of you who don't already know Dr. Cobb, he's the Director of Surgical Critical Care at the Keck Medicine School of Medicine of the University of Southern California. He's a professor in the departments of surgery and anesthesiology. Perren has been a real pioneer in quality improvement and emergency preparedness for research, and developed all kinds of tools for sepsis and played a key role in standardizing clinical research during public health crises. Dr. Cobb is also one of the original co-founders of the Discovery Clinical Research Network and has led multiple NIH and CDC-funded projects. So welcome, Perren. Awesome to see you. Next off, I get to introduce Dr. Karin Reuter-Rice. She is also an amazing, distinguished clinician, researcher, and educator at Duke University. She has appointments in both the School of Medicine and the School of Nursing. She does really pioneering interdisciplinary work that bridges pediatrics, neurosurgery, and brain science. She's a co-editor of Pediatric Acute Care, and research on childhood concussions has earned both recognition and support from NIH and mother institutions. She's a fellow of the American College of Critical Care Medicine and the American Academy of Nursing, and has been a co-leader of this amazing data science work coming out of Discovery. So Karin, thanks for being here. Great to see you. And lastly, our third and not least panelist is Dr. David Murphy, who's an associate professor of medicine at Emory University in the Division of Pulmonary Allergy, Critical Care, and Sleep Medicine. He's the director of quality for the Emory Critical Care Center, director of research for the Emory Healthcare Office of Quality, and the director of critical care quality at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. David has an extensive research background focusing on improving healthcare quality and patient safety by bridging the gap between evidence and practice, and is another leader of this C2D2 effort that we're going to hear more about today. So David, great to see you. Thanks for joining. And so with that, as I promised, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over, I believe, Karin, to you first to kind of start walking through this amazing process of the critical care data dictionary development.
Thanks so much, Laura, and welcome everyone. We're glad you're here. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on the background and history of how the Critical Care Data Dictionary, which we fondly call C2D2, came into evolution. Next slide. These are our disclosures. And next slide. All right, so a little bit about the Discovery Network, and then really critical care and how it's situated in data science through the Discovery Network. So a little bit about what is Discovery for those of you who may not be familiar with it. It's the Society of Critical Care Medicine's research network, and it's designed to accelerate and collaborate data-driven research and innovation. It brings together both clinicians, researchers, data scientists, and health systems to advance how we look at science practice of critical care. Importantly, the mission, and I think you'll see another slide in a minute, it's really to think more collaboratively around multi-professional research to improve the outcomes of critically ill and injured patients. And then really what does Discovery do? That's a lot of D's in a row there. It's really in place to facilitate multi-center research and innovation, to support early career investigators through grants and mentorships, which Laura just touched on. It hosts events like the Datathon and the clinical investigators meetings, which if you haven't enjoyed a Datathon yet, please think about enjoying one. It's really a great 36 hours of being in a room with data scientists and clinicians and coming up with really amazing answers to some very interesting questions. And on top of that, if you haven't attended a clinical investigators meeting, I hope you'll enjoy one of those in the future as well. And really here within the clinical investigators meetings, we're really looking to think strategically around collaboration and new research ideas might be something the critical care community is interested in, and then also driving the latest in innovation. And then last, Discovery also collaborates with industries, academia, and government to address critical care challenges. All right, next slide. Okay, so on the slide, I'm not going to read it, but I'm just going to give you some highlights. The Discovery Data Science campaign launched in May of 2022, and it had really a very focal mission as well as a vision. And what the mission was to really, was designed really to leverage big data approaches for research with an umbrella goal of real-time application in clinical settings. And they wanted to accomplish this with the standardized data models and shared resources. And the ultimate vision was to create opportunities to enhance knowledge, think about advancing critical care research, driving quality evidence, as well as improving health outcomes. All right, next slide. So there were three prioritized domains, and I'm going to largely focus on domain 1 today, but I wanted to just touch on the other two domains. Domain 3 is the annual datathons, which we're now in our 3rd year of. So that's been a very successful domain. Domain 2 will be what will be coming next, and that's a cloud-based analytic platform to really think about Discovery's future in data science. So just focusing on domain 1 today, we're going to delve into kind of the components of that, and then we'll talk more about the actual development of the critical care data dictionary. All right, next slide. Thank you. So while this is not really an ecological model, it is somewhat set up that way. And so you can see the greater society where Discovery sits within that, where the data science campaign sits within Discovery, and then where this work group, this data outcomes and definitions work group, which was a domain 1 initiative, and then the data dictionary, which was one of 3 components or 3 initiatives within this domain 1. Importantly, I don't know if you can click on that or not. You should see a QR code. Oops. There you go. And where that will take you is actually link you into the Discovery Data Science campaign. You'll find information there specifically around the data science campaign. You'll also find the 3 manuscripts that came out of our domain 1. One of those being the primer for data science in critical care. The second one was providing guiding principles for data harmonization and sharing. And then the third is the actual critical care data dictionary. And there's a really nice set of implementation tools that will be available for you there as well. All right, I'm going to pass the baton to Dr. Dave Murphy. If you can pass the next slide. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Karin, and thanks all for taking the time to be with us today. So I want to dive into what we were doing with the minimal core data set. And great, thanks. And so we really were conceptualizing this within domains, subdomains, and then going down to the common data elements. And it's important for us to understand and recognize that this is a core data set. It's not intended to be all-inclusive and to solve all use cases across the breadth of critical care. Next slide. Thanks. And so our strategy was to recognize that we wanted to support critical care across the human lifespan and across the spectrum of clinical illness and injuries that our patients in the ICUs who are critically ill are encountering. We wanted to capture information that was enable us to understand the adequacy and value of the resources that we are deploying across our individual institutions and then across broader groups of healthcare systems, either even on a national or international level. We also wanted to be looking at what were outcomes over time and be able to support that. It needed to be feasible across critical care settings, and that includes resource abundant as well as resource scarce settings, specifically those that were manual or had access to electronic data abstraction. And it needed to be extensible such that we had a core data set, but then you could add things on as different cassettes or modules to meet the individual study or QI or other use case. And we wanted to be able to support the real-time capture of information across the spectrum of care. And in the prior strategies, purpose, and characteristics really were designed to support that, because there are certainly, as we've seen within COVID and other public health emergencies, we need information quickly. And so we want to be able to support that as best able. Next slide. As I alluded to, we thought about different tiers of items. We thought about things on a high level domain, such as clinical assessment, on subdomains such as blood pressure, that really represents a group of variables within a domain, and then a concept, so specific measurements such as MAP or the like, and then the CDE, where we're looking at a specific framework for when the data element is being collected, and to try to put in some quality control definitions on what we're looking for with that. And so we're saying, what's for example, the lowest MAP in the first 24 hours of ICU admission measured by a blood pressure cuff. So trying to make that as operational as possible so we're able to compare like to like. Next slide. As we went through this process, we followed a modified Delphi process. We recruited a 23-member panel from across the spectrum of critical care patient populations, as well as disciplines and geographically. And we went through a process where we initially were focused on domains with domain generation for 2 rounds, and then reducing things down. We retained domains if they were considered, if our panelists, 80% of our panelists consider them to be critically important. We then actually had a review and in-person meeting as well, where we ratified that and came up with what our next steps were, and then generated the specific data elements. Again, 2 cycles of item generation, and then refining that, and then sending it back out for final review and evaluation to the broader group. And want to share those results with you now. So next slide. Thanks. So we initially started with 19 domains and subdomains. These were taken from a cohort or a group of data dictionaries from several different studies, and so we were able to provide our panel with an initial starting point. Didn't need to generate everything from the beginning. We went through item generation and then subsequently through item reduction. Next slide. Thanks. Oh, sorry, go back 1 second for me. Thanks. So again, just thinking about our domains and subdomains, we're thinking about diagnoses, outcomes, weight, blood pressure, and the like. And sorry, now next slide. Great. We wanted to recognize that a lot of different patient populations, investigation groups use different severity scores, and we use this as a way to, as a pulse check to see how broad are the measures that and the data elements that we have. Is there a way that we can have one data element support different severity scores and use that as a marker? And we actually were able to achieve having 80% of our variables were in at least one severity score, and quite a few being in additional ones. We provided the operational definitions that go along with each of these core data elements. Next slide. Thanks. And so It includes a range of elements in general critical care, and those are focused on some specific ICU patient populations. Again, acknowledging that it is not does not meet every need for every population, but it provides a starting point. We felt it was important to start to include social determinants of health, and both comorbidities, as well as the events that are going on within the ICU itself. So beyond the individual elements, we're thinking about those multiple disease severity scores, and it's adaptable to manual and electronic capture. Next slide. We recognize, and Perren, if you've talked with Perren for very long, you've heard him frequently say the crawl, walk, run methodology, and we followed that certainly, and recognize that this is version 1. It's not going to be perfect, but it hopefully provides a starting point for those who are on this webinar, as well as those across the critical care community. So we need to be validated, we need to be used across a diverse number of settings to see what is working and what's not working. Are there things that are missing that we may need to be in a future version of a core data set? Or are there elements that are extraneous and we're like, this is not actually providing high value, or elements that we need to redefine to make them more useful? So we're looking for insights and feedback on all of those areas. Again, recognizing it is not exhaustive. We do want to be able to plug in different cassettes. And then we want to be able to link that to broader structural organizational characteristics across the US and other databases as well. So events such as the datathon, but also individual investigations and multi-center investigations are able to utilize this as a way to stand up studies more efficiently and effectively. Next slide. So it provides this common language for critical care. We believe that by enabling SCCM members and those who are using this to not start from ground zero, we're giving folks a starting point, and we believe that that's going to yield smarter, faster, and more connected care on the individual study level, as well as being able to do secondary data analyses and other ways that we're going to be gaining insights from having a common core data set. And it's just important for us to know that we were building this with the community. We had experts from across the country, across patient populations, as well as across disciplines, coming together with active discussions, debates, arguments over what do we consider core? What is feasible? What's that right level? And then coming together and getting some agreement on this is what our first pass is at that. Acknowledging as we put this out into the broader SCCM and critical care community, we want that to be revised and to further build it and revise it with the broader community. So I'm going to stop there. No, I'm going to continue going. Sorry about that. So next steps, we're going to be thinking about integrating that with data monetization techniques. Again, lots of work within the data science campaign, as well as expanding applications, and SCCM leadership and others are exploring things with global partners. And we're looking again for through these grants and calls for proposals to validate the effectiveness of the data sets within the broader group. One more slide. There we go. Okay, great. So ultimately, we started off with 104 data elements. We ended up with 226 data elements scattered across this range of domains and subdomains that you see here. recognizing that there's going to be a variation in the utility across different populations, but wanting to be able to support patients and insights for neonatal pediatrics as well as adults across the spectrum. Next slide.
I
What's
think
next?
now you're off the hook with
Now I'm
presenting
off the hook. Thank you.
slides. Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Karin, for a really nice summary of, I think, what can only fairly be called an enormous amount of work and a really critical step towards having a shared common data elements we can use from that. If you go back, just show that QR code for a minute, and that is a really nice link to the C2D2 webpage that will take you to the manuscripts, the data dictionary, what CRF forms are available, and will be a resource repository moving forward. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to, Dave really nicely sort of segued into both some limitations, but also what some next steps are. And if you go back to this idea of use and validation, one really important next step is this C2D2 pilot project RFP. And so this is an award that the RFP is now open and active for to really start to pilot this and say, does this work, right? Dave and Karin talked about iteration and how this is a building block. So we see this pilot project as a core part of this development from it. So RFP is looking for proposals that will implement the C2D2 data dictionary and pipeline for harmonization. We're going to try to address some research questions from that. We're going to evaluate the burden and scalability of this across diverse environments. So you can see link here on the QR code to this. I want to just highlight that the budget for award is $250,000. That is inclusive of indirects. So it's not a huge award, but it's a substantial award. And I really think is a really important step in moving this work forward. So I encourage you, if you have interest in this resources, follow the link to the RFP, check it out, and think about applying for it. You can go to the next slide, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. Too much talking by me, not enough by our panelists yet. From that, the QR code again here is for the resources from that. Perren, I'm going to ask you for some comments since you got off the hook with the formal presentation piece here. And so I'm going to ask you for some summary comments, and then I have a question for you. So let me open it up to you first, Perren.
Thank you. It's an honor to follow such a great series of presentations from my friends, and you know how earnestly I appreciate your expertise and your collegiality over the last 2 to 3 years that we've been working on it. And I'll simply emphasize a couple of points that David made, that you know, this is hard. It's hard because it's a lot of work, heavy lifting, Delphi, all of that what we talked about. But you know, the real testing comes now. It's one thing to publish a critical care data dictionary. It's another thing to have, you know, some large number, hopefully the majority of the investigators in discovery using it. We joked as we were getting ready to publish it, somewhat tongue in cheek, that we're hopeful if we really did our job, we'd be hopeful that the paper'd get published and there'd be people suggesting revisions immediately. So we certainly look forward to hearing from the community. So it's difficult from a heavy lifting standpoint. It's also difficult from an implementation standpoint. And there are other groups, right? We're not the only investigator-initiated hypothesis testing network on the planet. I've talked to friends at ANZIX in the clinical trials group there, the CTG, and they tried this several years ago and decided as a group, after pursuing it for a while, that they weren't going to pursue it because it's hard and they weren't sure that it was going to be implemented. So we really appreciate the work, and we look forward to this group, speaking of reaching out to our community, starting with this group to get feedback, to iterate, begin working on version 2, and then use the substantial resources made available through this RFP for objective number 3 to really kick the tires on it and see how we need to revise it. So again, thanks. Look forward to other questions from the group.
Awesome. Thanks, Perren. I'm as the moderator's prerogative, I'm going to take the opportunity of asking the first question to our panel. But if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand or put them in the chat from that. So I'll give you the opportunity to type or raise your hand while I'm talking here. So this is a kind of to each of the panelists from here. But one of the things I've been doing lately is thinking a lot about how do we as clinicians, how do we as researchers communicate the impact of what we do to different audiences? So my first question to you is sort of, if you were talking to somebody who isn't involved in research at all, or a layperson, for example, how would you describe the potential impact and importance of having a core data set for critical care research? And maybe Dave, I'll pick on you first, or
Okay.
Perren's unmuted.
Yeah,
so
I'm ready.
first.
I'm ready to go. So I
Okay,
start
do it.
off with, it's a great question, and all of us should be practiced at answering it. So I think the heart of the question is, how do we get better? And just ask somebody that and just pause and have them explain how people get better. There's no way they're going to be able to answer that without at some point getting to collecting information about currently we're at point B, we want to get better. I'm sorry, point A, we want to get better at point B. And how do we do that? And then standardization has to be part of that. And let's start somewhere. Dave mentioned the crawl, walk, run approach. So if we were to start crawling towards standardizing a data process, what would that look like? Hence C2D2. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. And we only have to look back to COVID and perhaps even more recently in other settings, but where the world was focused on healthcare, on critical, including critical care, and saying, what is this new thing called COVID? And how do we diagnose it? How do we understand what the implications of getting this infected with COVID, and then how do we treat it? And we were hamstrung as a planet on how do we study, and lots of I think many on this call have recognized it was really hard to get things stood up on the individual organizational setting, let alone across. And so that led to delays. And dare I say, it led to lost lives. And personally, I would like to avoid that happening again. And I think by creating a common language, a common core data set, again, it doesn't add, it may not answer every single question for a novel virus, but it does provide a starting point. And it does start us as a critical care community to start thinking about, how do we define things? How do we develop the infrastructure within our individual organizations so that we're able to quickly and reliably step up when questions arise in public health emergencies, but also on individual research questions that are not necessarily receiving that same global attention.
And so maybe I'll just chime in here, and I'm thinking of it as, you know, the clinician learner or the doctoral students that I teach, and that is, when you want to collaborate with others and do similar science, how are you defining your variables, right? How are you defining those so that everything you're collecting looks the same, so you can harmonize your data and your analyses on the back end? And I think that sometimes we assume, as Dave so nicely illustrated, you know, mean arterial pressure. Well, when, where, and how is it measured? And I think that this is one of those kind of basics that I think we measure many different ways. I know in our institution, we map many different ways. And I think just having a definition to how someone could use a map in defining their population is at least a first step. And I think particularly for learners who are starting, this is a really nice kind of template. I would also say that one of the things that we recognize is that this is for a one-time collection, primarily at admission. And so this may be able to, at least if nothing else, if you're collaborating with colleagues, have a table one that you could report your sample characteristics in the same way. So I think there are some nice nuances to this, and I think it's a framing and a very, very early beginning framing. And I would agree with Perren. I would think there will be multiple iterations of this as we go forward.
Great, thanks for that. Questions are starting to come into the chat, so keep them coming, everybody. Ashish, I don't know, are you able to come off mute and ask your question? Or do you want me to reread it?
I can come off mute. Hello, although I'm in a noisy ICU environment.
We can hear you okay, though. Go ahead and
All
ask
right.
your question if you would.
Yeah, so I actually shared this data dictionary with one of my colleagues who is board certified in clinical informatics, and she's been looking to ask me this question. So maybe this is coming from her as well. How about, looking at these variables and seeing if anyone has looked at their compatibility with the OMOP common data model. And I wasn't able to hear all of the talks that preceded this. So if this has already been done and explained, I'm sorry, but has this been done already? Or is there interest in doing this? Maybe
I'll
my
start off
question
and
is
say
directed
it
to,
has
yeah,
not been
I was going to say
done.
David. Yeah.
Sure. So thanks. Really important. And if OMOP wasn't mentioned at least once during each round and almost in regularly when we were meeting in person, that's a great taxonomy, broadly speaking, and we recognize we do need to map towards that. But that has not been done. There are folks who are actively looking at it, but also again, that is work that needs to be done I think in the near future. Perren?
Yeah, thanks to the question. So OMOP and FHIR as common data models, we recognize are the future with regard to standardization at a global level under the Odyssey OHDSI umbrella. Discovery has a program called Accelerating Quality Improvement and Research that looks at not C2D2, but the data elements for the new Centers of Excellence program and mapping them to OMOP and FHIR. We submitted that to the NIH as a proposal, the National Library of Medicine. It was reviewed a couple months ago and does not have a fundable score currently, but it was recognized by the reviewers as the foundation for a great applied clinical informatics program. I think the issue, and there are several acquire of investigators who are on the call, it was more not so much that it wasn't important, but is the National Library of Medicine the right fit as far as funding it? So to Ashish's question and your answer, Dave, it has not been mapped C2D2 to OMOP, but certainly should be. And I think there'd be value to Discovery and the society in general of having its initial version 1 of the research common data set, if you will, common data elements C2D2, and also being able to couple that with the Centers of Excellence A to F data elements, being able to marry the performance improvement and the research piece as two sides of the data coin, I think would be extremely valuable to the society, understanding I have a big bias in this direction. That's the caveat.
Great, thank you. No, that's very, very useful because, we've already done some preliminary analyses and I'd be happy to share more with you as we finish the analyses, and it's actually pretty interesting. I just wanted to be sure that this has not been done, and this is of interest to the society and will be helpful. So but once I have everything, I'll share it with you guys. We might send the manuscript for peer review that we are producing here internally, but I'll definitely keep you guys in the loop. And then if anyone has other flavors to this that they want to share with me offline, I'd be more than happy to set up some collaboratives. I have a really nice group here that does a lot of OMOP stuff, so they're super excited with what they're seeing with this data dictionary.
Great, thanks, Ashish. Keeping in that theme, before we go to the sort of the next question, Jackie, can I put you on the spot about you put a couple relevant comments in the chat here, and I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to be shared more widely for those who aren't able to monitor the chat.
Sure, and Ashish probably has more experience than I am. I'm currently running a multi-center critical care research collaborative mapping our perioperative and ICU flow sheet data to the OMOP CDM, and there remains some ambiguity with that system, some challenges getting our very specific critical care data mapped one-to-one to OMOP. So that might be something that we want to explore if OMOP's on the table at some point. And then NIH also, as most of you know, has their CDEs, their common data elements. So it might be worth ensuring that there's a crosswalk done between that as well, the CDEs, the CDM, and the C2D2. And I'm willing to help as a junior faculty member on anything as appropriate.
Thanks for those comments, Jackie. You have mastered the alphabet soup, certainly, of all of these things. Let me go next, if I can, to Rob for your question.
Sure. Thank you. Very nice presentation. I guess, my question kind of relates to, I think, Dave, you said this, and, obviously there's going to be edits and revisions to the C2D2 data set, and there's going to be a desire to validate it at the same time. So how do you sort of make edits in real time and validate it? And then obviously we encourage other institutions to use it and make modifications. So how do we ensure that it remains validated if people are sort of changing it as we go?
So I'll start, and others are going to correct me when I'm inevitably wrong. But I think, as we think about basically change management and iteration management, this is version 1. And we want to study version 1 from a data dictionary perspective. So we don't want to change a whole lot on that. I'm going to say why that's wrong in a second, but we do want to understand how the current version works. And in doing that, though, we also want to understand how are people needing to change it. So actually doing that meta kind of higher second order analysis of saying how are data elements needing to be evolved in order to make it work within individual studies and contexts. And so that's actually one of the things that I believe we were looking for from the proposals, is to have that reflective element to say, what did you need to do to change? Not only what scientific question did you ask and answer, and what are the results and the implications for our clinicians and patients, but also to reflect back and say, okay, you took this tool, what worked, what didn't, and how do we then need to change it? There's obviously maybe elements that so the timeline on when we go to version 2 is that's up in the air, but it depends upon how people react to version 1. Others?
I'm just going to echo what you just said. I would agree. I think the RFP that's coming out is that first validation step. I think we'll learn a lot. I think others that are interested in trying this, even if it's on small scale, will also have wonderful feedback. And I think the society will put metrics in place for how changes will need to be adapted and adopted.
Great. Let's go to the next question then. The questions are coming into the chat nicely, so keep them coming, everybody. Bahi, are you able to come off mute to ask your question?
Hi,
Go ahead.
I just asked a question. Is that the last one here?
Let me go to Bahi's first, Rodrigo,
Okay.
and then we'll come back to you if that's okay. But I see you. You're in my queue. The next question was, how does this pan out over different electronic health records, and do Medicare or Medicaid required codes play a part in this? Any takers?
I'm going to keep forging ahead at the. So again, we had lots of discussions. You know, OMOP I think was probably number one in terms of side conversations, followed shortly by different EMRs, right? And one person's version, one institution's version of Epic may not actually fully reflect that of another organization's, right? So even within in individual organizations, if they have the same medical record vendor, their instance of that EMR may vary. We need to understand what that is. So if we can create basic extraction scripts and develop that and be able to share that, that would be great. Editing and modifying as across institutions or across over time also will play a role. And then certainly the EMR vendors themselves, as they're looking towards more standardized deployments of their products, cloud-based and centralized, they're looking to decrease the variation between institutions that are using their products. Regardless, we still ultimately have different vendors who are doing things. Getting them into a room to agree upon how they're structuring the data within their products, that's a whole nother level above this. But one of the first questions that is going to be asked by that group is going to be, so what do you want it to look like? If you guys are the content experts in critical care, what should it look like? And this provides a foundation for us to be able to have those conversations.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Okay, Rodrigo, over to you for the next question.
Hi, I'm new here. I'm really excited to be part of this society and really looking forward to research collaboration. And I'm just trying to understand what is the purpose of this data set. I have worked with a pneumonia data set that was led by Dr. Julio Ramirez here at the University of Louisville. It was a worldwide data set where investigators of the world would feed that, and then, if someone had a hypothesis or wanted to write an article, then, could use statisticians here from University of Louisville and would help. And with that, there was many interesting studies that came out. And I was just trying to see how is this data set gonna be used, in that regard. I'm just trying to understand that. Is it gonna be like an investigator who wants to just feed data into the data set will do that, or do we need a specific project and a local IRB approval? I'm just trying to understand really. Thank you.
Karin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just can give you an example to answer your question. I appreciate it. How might we use it, or what's the anticipation? So let's take the clinical example, the clinical question you have with pneumonia. So our expectation would be if you have two investigators, both of whom are a group of investigators who want to study pneumonia, you might think, well, what are we going to start off measuring? And you'd come up with a list of variables based upon previous published studies of pneumonia, or you might have some ideas on your own, and people would say, well, we need to map that and figure out, we use Epic, somebody else uses Cerner, somebody else uses Meditech, and we need to try to pull those data in. So you could establish that pneumonia data set for this particular group across those three EHR vendors. That's going to be a lot of heavy lifting for the group. And then somebody else might come in and say, as a collaborating group also studying aspects of lung disease, that we have a different set of elements that we use. So you can see that if you had, say, a warm base of investigators studying pneumonia or other lung disease that had already set up a way to extract these data, the C2D2 data, and the case report forms that are on the webpage now are based upon REDCap, but we expect that to expand pretty significantly as far as other database companies or other cloud solutions for that. You could see that if you already had it set up so you could talk to your analytics team and extract those data based upon a common standard that had already been implemented, it would make that a lot more efficient. And you could also provide value to the community to say, we appreciate version 1 of C2D2. We're the pneumonia investigators. We like, of those 226 data elements, these are the, I'm just making this up, 150 that were really informational in our particular study, but we wanted to add an additional 50 to version 2 for other groups that might want to study pneumonia or lung disease. So that's one example of how at least I envision this might be used with a group of investigators who are interested in testing a specific hypothesis. It's a tool to help you be able to more easily standardize data extraction and analysis. Does that help?
Absolutely. And what if you have different investigators with different hypotheses using the same forms? Can someone kind of put that together and query, like, put all this data that is collected by different groups using the same form and put together so that suddenly you have a huge sample size for a specific hypothesis?
Short answer is yes. That's objective or domain number 2 for the data science campaign. On one of the earlier slides, there was the middle data hub. That's the data repository, the registry, if you will, the database that's currently in development. The SCCM to this point has used REDCap as its cloud-based solution, but maybe Laura or one of the other data science campaign folks or our SCCM staff can help answer that question as far as the data hub.
So let's say that I have a study on pneumonia and I have a hypothesis here, and I use the forms that you all provided, and I get an approval from my local IRB. Does that go to, so we have a REDCap, but does this data go to a cloud REDCap that other investigators from the Society of Critical Care Medicine could potentially have access to?
Can I defer that to our domain 2 data science campaign expertise?
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tamara, Senior Program Manager for Research and Quality at SCCM. So that's a great question, and we adhere to the of course HIPAA, and we also adhere to the data sharing and harmonization guiding principles. That was another paper that was put out for the data science campaign. So there are safeguards in place for us to not have, if you're using, for example, our REDCap cloud, we would not just share that data with anyone without a proper data use agreement, without discussion with you on how that your data that it's yours, even if it's de-identified, aggregated. We have steps in place to make sure that we are sharing the data ethically. We're sharing the data in accordance to an IRB. So we are not, it's all protected. Now, when we do have this data hub, this similar safeguards will be in place. So this is still protected, and we are not just openly, we would love to. I know everyone would love to, but there are many laws in place that would not allow that. So, we are planning on giving more information about, how to share and collaborate, but a lot of that, it was you run through or work with SCCM. We have master use agreements and data user agreements that we can provide, and people submit proposals, for example, to share that, to be able to access your data. So you're not just handing the data to someone and you don't know what their use case is, or if that's scientifically sound in your opinion. So we have an ancillary project proposal portal in Discovery. So you yourselves, for example, virus is a great example of data that we collected as SCCM from over 400 sites, and people submit their proposals through that. It goes through a steering committee to check the validity of that. And then we go through multiple, DUAs. We make sure that we are giving you the most relevant data elements. It's aggregated, it's protected, and then we share that with you in a secure manner, and then you publish results from those. So I hope that answers your question on that, but that's just a little bit about what's going on. And, the data hub will be unveiled in the future about that as well. So we're working on it. Hand it back to
Thank
Laura.
Thanks, Tamara. I just want to sort of emphasize that there's I think we're talking about a couple different things at once here. One is about the C2D2 data definitions, which I think is in my understanding and interpretation is, Perren, David, and Karin, is really important foundational work, right? To make sure that we're talking about the same things in the same way, right? To define an apple and to define an orange, so that I can say, this pneumonia is caused by apples versus this pneumonia is caused by oranges. Forgive the bad analogy there, but and then that potentially leads in the future towards another domain of the data science campaign, which is development of this data hub, and potentially even further down the road, this large critical care data repository. So I think, but right now we're talking, the Perren, Dave, Karin have really been involved in this really important foundational work to define data elements that could be in this data set. But if you choose right now to download the CRFs, right, you can use those locally. They don't go into any shared repository. You can just use them for your own study and sort of test, do these CRFs work? Or you could collaborate with Discovery, right, and say we want to use Discovery Cloud, et cetera, the RedCap Cloud of Discovery to kind of execute our research project. So I hope that helps kind of clarify where we are. Dave, Perren, Karin, I want to give you the opportunity to add any additional clarifying comments. I got a head shake, so.
I think that's perfect, and pretty sure aspiration of both apples and oranges is bad in the case of pneumonia.
Cool. Well, we're almost out of time here, so I want to go back to each of our panelists and see if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make to this group. I want to thank everybody for their participation, but let me pause there and see if any of our panelists want to make any closing remarks before I kind of close us out.
Karin here, I don't have anything else to add. Great session, really appreciate the input and look forward to working with people on this. I do think it would be, I guess I do have one thing to add. I do think it would be helpful, when we meet in person and we talk about projects of interest to folks, we can ask people to raise their hand who'd like to work on this project. I think doing something similar to that with people who'd like to work on, for example, the standardization piece of mapping C2D2 to OMOP or FHIR. That would serve a broad range of investigators and is not easy, it's not cheap. And I think having a group work together on that, for example, as an early deliverable would be really helpful. Thank you. It's a privilege to be on the panel.
Thanks, Perren. Dave, any comments?
Completely agree and appreciate the thoughtful questions, because this is a starting point and this is the conversation that we've been looking for and look forward to continuing to have.
I'm just going to echo what Dave said, and I think this has been really a great opportunity to just talk with people and see how they're translating what their understanding is of C2D2. And I just would love to point people back into the direction of the data dictionary and look at the resource tools that the society has started building to help investigators. And then I look forward to the iterations and the conversations as we continue to develop this work as a community.
Thanks. Well, I want to extend my incredibly sincere and deep thanks to each of you for your willingness to do this town hall and to present this work, and more importantly, to take this work on and do this really important foundational work. So thank you, Perren, thank you, Dave, thank you, Karin, and thank you to each of you for taking time to attend this town hall and to ask questions and your engagement. This is what makes Discovery really fun, and is one of the reasons to get involved with Discovery. So thanks to each of you for that. This session has been recorded. It'll be available. If you registered, you'll get a link to it. Otherwise, it'll also be on the C2D2 website. So send your friends that direction, send questions. If you have any questions or concerns about anything, feel free to reach out to the link on the SCCM Discovery website. There's a contact us. It'll get you initially to Tamara. So Tamara, sorry for the flood of emails coming your way, but look forward to helping you sort them through. Thanks all for your time, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day and a great weekend. Be well, everybody.